Welcome to Book Banter with me, your host, Dianne Burkhart. I hope you will join me every Wednesday as we explore all things to do with, well, books. Let's get on with our show today. Hello, my happy people, and welcome to Book Banter with Dianne Burkhart, your book talk podcast, holiday hiatus episodes. From now until January 28th, we are going to be playing some of the best episodes from season 4 for you while we're over here gearing up for season 5. We've already got some incredible people wanting to be on the show, and we are going to be bringing you so much more this next season. We're going to be looking for a few cookbook authors, and we're also looking for more industry professionals to help you learn how to do just about anything to do with books even better. So now let's go ahead and get to today's episode, and don't forget to stick around to the very end, of course, because we are going to be giving you a little bit of a heads up on the authors who are also going to be broadcast during our holiday hiatus. But for now, let's just get right to today's episode. Please welcome to Book Banter with Dianne Burkhart, Doug Williams. Now, the way that I always start all of my episodes is I have my guests tell our listeners who you are and what you do.
My name is Doug Williams. I'm a writer. I've been, writing most of my life. I have a background. I'm a recovering journalist and worked as a press secretary in the Senate for a number of years, and then did, a stint in the corporate world and ran the public affairs government relations thing for a mid-sized agency on the Atlantic coast. And about, 25 years ago, I made the decision to go out and become actually it's longer ago than that, probably 30 years ago, went out and made the decision to become a freelance writer because I was writing plays and I needed some flexibility to work on the plays going to and from New York. So, and I've carved out a career as a freelance writer doing business related stuff, but also books, plays, and screenplays.
I think that was probably one of the things that most impressed me was that you've been able to make a career out of being a freelancer, because I have so many friends who have attempted that transition, and I see them struggling with it. And for you to be successful in that while you're doing all of these plays, which you have award-winning plays that you've put out too. Mm-hmm. That is so impressive.
Well, the thing is when you go out in freelancing, the battle is not money and the battle is not getting clients. The battle is beating fear, because you're out there without a safety net. You go over the ledge and you go over the ledge. And for the first probably, 3 or so months when I did it, I was working 20-hour days and not getting much sleep at all. Finally, I said, man, this has got to stop. This is not healthy. And so I just kind of reconfigured my thinking and sort of just focused on people I knew, clients I had worked for when I was in the ad agency business, friends. And I had set myself a goal of this is what I want to make annually. And within 18 months, it tripled it. But the thing about it is you got to get through that fear. And I don't care how strong you are. I don't care how good you are. I don't care how confident you are. There's still going to be some really bleak nights when you wake up staring at a ceiling. Now, I was fortunate. My wife at the time was also working, not making a lot of money, but she was also working. But like I said, I just, sort of lucked into some work and got a lot of word of mouth referrals, never really had to market myself very much. And then, have made a run of it that, continues to this day while still being able to. I just finished a new play and of course, this book, and I'm working on a new screenplay up in the very, very, very early stages of development in Los Angeles. So yeah, I've been fortunate in that regard.
I think it's really interesting. It's like I have a background in journalism and I also worked in advertising. I've never had anything like being a press secretary for any kind of organization, let alone the U.S. Senate. That had to be amazing. But out of all of these careers that you've transitioned through in communications, which one do you think was actually the most stressful?
There are probably a couple. The newspaper business, I didn't find particularly stressful. I went straight to work for one of the best papers in the country 2 days after I graduated from college.
Oh, wow.
So there was a little bit of stress and fear there, but that migrated out pretty fast. But the two things were when I worked in the Senate, and the senator I worked for, who shall remain anonymous, but he got caught in a financial scandal that broke shortly after we got to Washington. And so I literally had to spend 18 months dealing with journalists everywhere from 60 Minutes to the New York Times to the local press who had something and were pursuing it as you would expect they would. Mm. And, that was in 18 months. And I'm not going to lie, that's, you're sitting there in the halls of power in Washington and you're having to deal with that can be pretty stressful. And the other thing was when I was in the agency business, I did a lot of crisis management. Give you an example, just one. I had a client who had a facility in a major metropolitan area that blew up one day. Oh. And didn't blow up, excuse me. It erupted in a fire and a small explosion. And I had to spend 3 months on the ground just dealing with the media, dealing with the lawyers, dealing with the local activists who were protesting all the time, managing the media during a lengthy trial to see if this company was going to be shut down.
Wow.
And so that was a bit of an adventure too. I happen to like that environment. So I felt the stress, but I also, kind of ate it up.
So how do you deal with stress?
I don't really have a problem with it anymore. I can stay very focused on what I'm doing. If something is freaking me out, I've got the wherewithal to take 2 steps back and not let it eat me alive. I do a lot of reading to calm down. Frankly, I spend a lot of time in the gym, which really de-stresses me. And then I learned not to let things bother me. And I think that's a huge thing. And that's probably only been a relatively recent thing with me, is that I'm just not letting things get to me anymore. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking, okay, this is going to resolve itself one way or the other. And I've got a theory that, worrying about things, doesn't change the odds of them going right or wrong. So I just deal with the things as they come, knowing full well that at some point I'm going to figure it out. And invariably I do. I can resolve things that maybe a year or 2 or 3 years ago, may have had me in the bed with covers pulled over my head.
One of the things that we've been talking about a lot in the last season was just mental health issues and how being a freelancer or being an indie author, or even traditionally published author, comes with so much stress. Because it's like publishing houses now want you to have a huge following on your own before they even take you on. Right. And it's up to you to do your marketing. They may publish your book, but you still have to promote yourself and your work. Yep. So that's one of the reasons why we've been focusing on it's like how people deal with stressors. Yeah. And is it worth it?
Dianne, I think you're right. I mean, I wrote this book relatively fast, 18 months, and usually it takes me much longer to write a book. But the marketing has been far more time consuming and far more difficult than actually writing the book. And, I got a therapist and we talk about this stuff all the time, mm-hmm. about how to, just how to navigate it. And one of the things I've had to come to terms with, and you hear it all the time in indie publishing, is that, most people, the book comes out, then it's like, it was a month before with the ARCs, and then, it's 2 months after it comes out, and then it tends to stop. And I kind of had that mindset, but then I've decided now, no, not to use a cliche, but this is a marathon. This is a marathon. We had a campaign that ran up until Christmas, and then I'm in the early stages of a phase 2 campaign now. And I just think that you've got to settle in for the long run. Mm-hmm. I think you're just setting yourself up for psychological destruction, frankly, if you think that, in the 60 days prior and the 60 days post-publication, that's all you can hope for. It's a good foundation, but I think you've got to move forward. And I also had to teach myself social media. I'm a bit of a Luddite, mm-hmm. and I had to teach myself how to use social media. And that's an eye opener. I'm calling all my millennial friends. You're 30. Can you help me how to do this? And that's social media is just is vast consumer of time. I'm getting better at it and a little bit more efficient, and it's showing some results. I mean, I don't monitor my book sales, but I monitor the activity. Mm-hmm. And using social media has demonstrated to me that I'm getting good activity, I'm getting good impressions, and I'm selling some books to people that probably I would not otherwise interface with. So, like I said, you just got to recognize you're going to be in it for the long run. However you define the long run, 6 months a year, but you got to be in it for the long run. Otherwise, I think you're going to come apart at the seams mentally.
Oh yeah, it can really start to weigh down, especially new people who. They just decided one day, I want to go ahead and try and self-publish a book, but they don't have any background in advertising. They don't
Yeah.
have any background in journalism and writing press releases and how to deal with the media to actually get their work out there.
Yeah.
And they're just kind of struggling to figure it out. When they're not getting good returns on the things that they're doing, they start to feel a little bit lost. So
Yeah.
I've been trying to talk about this more with people who are a little bit more experienced like yourself to let people know it's like, hey, you're not the only one, even though you're new at all of
Oh,
this.
oh
Even
my
people
God.
who are old hands at it.
I
have
know,
struggle.
I mean, I follow people online. I get texts from people and, and I tell people all the time, listen, they say, oh my God, I only sold 5 books in the first month. I'm not a writer. And my response is, yes, you are a writer. You have a book. So
Mm-hmm.
let's just get over that right now. But the idea of success and failure in publishing, I don't write books to make money. I never have. I've got other sources of income.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm hearing from people all the time. My book must be awful because nobody's buying it, but they're not marketing it. They're not
Yeah.
doing the kinds of thing. There's an assumption that, once you get it out there, people are going to find it and read it. And of course, that's a false assumption.
Mm-hmm.
You really got to work at it, man. You really got to work at it. And it takes time. Oh, boy, does it take time.
And with the ever-changing landscape of social media, it's hard to keep finding where your market has moved.
Oh, man. I tried for about a month on TikTok because everybody's saying book talk, TikTok, this is where you go.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't figure it out, but I'll be diplomatic in my language here. But, when I first opened an account, I was getting all these followers and all these friends. And I was thinking, wow, this is great. This is really going to be easy because I've got this vast number of people to market to.
Mm-hmm.
And then I found that most of them were young women of ill intentions.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, this just isn't going to work. And I tried. I get good traction on Instagram. I've sold a lot of books off Facebook, and I'm getting some traction on LinkedIn. So I've pretty much limited to that other than using the website and getting some of the promotional videos out there.
Speaking of which, your website is fantastic.
Oh, thank you. My web guy is a filmmaker.
That comes across.
and he's had films on Showtime, for example. He had something shown at the Cannes Film Festival, and he's a dear friend of mine. And we do a lot of work together, both creatively and business wise. I told him about doing these promotional videos. I said, listen, man, all we need to do is just hold up a camera phone and I'll talk to it. Well, asking Wayne to do that that's not his language. So, he came in and with lights and multiple cameras. And then when he got the shots from multiple directions, he went in and did the promotional videos and came up with a complete intro that just looks spectacular. So yeah, he's really good. I will pass along to him. I know he'll appreciate that.
Well, I was watching all of these again today because on your page under the story,
Mm-hmm.
there is the Behind Failure Point with Doug Williams video series. It has the
Right.
story, the origins of an idea, the challenge, and the eureka moment. And they are fantastic videos. I mean, they're so short, but they have so much in them.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
I think if anybody ever has any questions about this book, if they go and watch these videos, they're buying the book as soon as they're done.
I'm hoping so. I'm
Yeah.
hoping so. But I do. I was just so happy with the videos, and the videos have gotten a great response. And it's interesting that after the publication date, we've done a run up with the promotional stuff, but we're getting more and more and more traction after the publication date, and particularly about 30 days after the publication date. We got more interactions. We got more interactions with the video. Yeah, I was getting more notes from people. We got people reacting to the Facebook and Instagram posts. And a lot of it, I think, had to do with the videos because, I'm with you. I think the videos are just terrific. I think my friend Wayne Slayton, who's the film director who does it, is he's just wonderful.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, thank you. I'll tell him that. I will. Yeah.
Now, I do want to back up a little bit here.
Sure.
You started out in journalism. You did the work in advertising as a press secretary, and you started writing screenplays.
Actually, I started writing stage plays. I was doing my stint in corporate America. It was about a year. And I'd had 2 or 3 plays produced in New York in small houses. One of them was probably, I would call a success. But I had been commissioned to write a play by a regional theater based on the life of Barbara Jordan, who was probably in her time in the from about 72 to 76 or 78, may well have been the most prominent Black politician in America, widely respected all over the world. And so I was commissioned to write this play, and I wrote this play. It was not a particularly good play, honestly. Good production, but not a good play. But a director I'd worked with in New York had an off-Broadway company that had done a couple of my shows. And I flew her down and said, you got to tell me if this thing is worth pursuing or if it's as bad as I think it is. And she came down, she said, yeah, it's pretty bad, but I can fix it. So I said, okay. But she said, you're going to have to make a decision. I was like, okay. And she says, you are not going to be able to devote the time that you need to fix this play and still work full time. So you've got to make a decision. You've got to leave the corporate world and figure out a way to make money and spend money and then spend time and effort to get this play right. Or you can spend the next 5 years of your life, doing it an hour here and an hour there and never getting it done. It took me about 4 seconds to make that decision. And then, so what happened was we redid this play and we did a staged reading of it with the late Lynn Thigpen in the lead role, and it got a rapturous response. I mean, we put 500 people in a house on 42nd Street. They were hanging from the rafters. Standing ovation. I mean, it was really humbling, actually. And we fully expected the play was going to take off. The next day, the phone didn't ring, and the director started making some phone calls, and they said, we love the play. The play was spectacular. You got 17 actors playing 50 parts. The economics of it just don't work. So I was like, okay, I got that. I understand. That's when it became a movie. And then I turned it into a movie. Miss Thigpen had said, you really ought to make this a movie. So that's when I began, what's probably been an 18 or 20 year adventure in getting this thing into a film script that's, as I said, now is in Hollywood.
And is this the same person that you are working on Kitty's Back?
No, my wife and I are working on Kitty's Back. Kitty's Back is a new screenplay. And one day in one of the newsletters I get, there was a story about how in 1967, the CIA spent $21 million on something called Project Acoustic Kitty. This is true. Weird, but true, where they thought that they could train a cat to be a spy. And so they, as I said, they spent $21 million to do it. So they decided to run what we would now call a beta test in, I think it was Central Park or maybe someplace in Washington, where they put the cat down and the cat was wired. The cat had chips and wiring and antennas and everything else. So they sent the cat in the direction of two people who were sitting on a bench that were suspected Russian spies. And the cat started going there and then saw a squirrel and completely forgot everything, ran out in the street and got hit by a car. And so Project Acoustic Kitty ended right there. But I started thinking, oh my God, why not contemporize this? We've got new technology. So I started researching about how to train cats, about, they make these little crocheted beanies that they can put on cats to measure their brain waves. So I just did all of this reading and came up with a contemporary version of it that I'm about, 55 or so pages into. But yeah, so that's a new one. And it's so funny because the play my wife and I are finishing up now is very serious. And Failure Point is rather serious. So it was so funny to sit down and write something. I can't write comedy, and I don't think comedy's in lines. I think it's in situations. Mm-hmm. But it was so funny to sit back and just kind of write something light and just having the best time. Having the best time doing it, So that's what Kitty's Back is all about. Kitty is the new cat on the block.
So you were having this success as a screenplay writer. Mm-hmm. What made you decide to try writing books?
I had written a book some years ago that got middling reviews. I'm not even going to give you the title for reasons that will become obvious. It got middling reviews, but I read it a year after it was published and thought, this is one of the worst books in the history of the English language. I thought it was awful. So what I did was I worked with a guy named Richard Merrick, who was Hemingway's editor, but was really instrumental in getting Thomas Harris's career going by editing Black Sunday. So Mr. Merrick and I worked on a couple of drafts, and he has since passed. But I got it right where I wanted it to go, and then I started writing movies. And then I went back and forth from movies to scripts. And then I had an idea, oh God, it's probably been 10 years now, about a book I'd long wanted to write on a subject I'd long wanted to write. And that became Nowhere Man, which did get good notices. But then that fell by the wayside because the screenwriting, started to take off. And then I wanted to sit back and write a novel that dealt with some of the themes I like to deal with, but also took an unflinching look at a marriage, in the guise of a suspense thriller, kind of tinged with mystery. So it's been, one thing and then another thing. And then, it's like I have creative ADD, I bounce from one thing to another.
Do you think bouncing like that actually feeds your creativity? That keeps everything fresh?
Yeah, I do. Because, as I'm sure you know, the requirements in writing a screenplay are very different from those from writing a novel and very different from those writing a stage play. It takes an entirely different set of skills by the nature of the medium, but also by the fact that stage play takes place on a stage. Films have to be written in a certain way. A book, you can go all over the map.
Yeah.
So what happens is I do think that one thing feeds another, and in the process sharpens all of the attendant skills. I'm working on a sequel right now to A Failure Point, and I noticed the other day when I was writing that my writing felt sharper and crisper and more focused. And what I'd written in the interim between, finishing the book and the sequel was plays and screenplays. Mm-hmm. And I'm certain that dealing with writing in those forms, I'm sure informed the writing of the sequel, because the sequel's coming a lot easier and a lot more creatively, I think, than did before. I'm not having to work at it as hard. And I do believe that's the upshot of screenplays, which have to be written in a certain way. And some of the things I've learned from screenplays, I've actually applied to novel writing in terms of pacing and chapter length and dialogue. And stage plays are kind of their own animal because there's no exposition in a stage play. Mm-hmm. You've got to be able to really capture your character in what they say. And I've really tried to do that in novel writing as well. I'm one of these people that is not a big fan of saying he said, or, he exclaimed, or he noted. What I try to do is I try to, and I study this relentlessly, is I try to say, okay, when a person is feeling tense, what are his facial expressions? What are his eyes doing? What is her mouth doing? Like that. And then I will use that to communicate the emotion without saying he exclaimed, he noted. He mused, he smiled. And a lot of that has to do with stage writing, because like I said, in stage writing, you don't have the luxury of explaining, how the character thinks, how the character acts and talks. It's got to be right there. And you've got to be able to write that way. I
know that you are a plotter.
Mm-hmm.
How religiously do you stick to your plots once you have them worked out?
I have a standing rule, and it's something I picked up from screenwriting. I have a digital corkboard on my computer. And when I have an idea, when I have a scene, when I have a thought, I'll put it on a digital 3x5 card and throw it up on the corkboard. At some point, I'll begin to organize it. And then when I've got at least 60 up there, I will actually begin to write the book. Now, that said, that digital corkboard, when it seems perfectly organized, at the end of the day is only going to be about probably 60 to 65% of the final book. But what it does is it gives me a roadmap. I need to know where I'm going before I can sit down and write. A lot of people don't, and I don't begrudge them that, but I need to know what the last 20 or 30 pages are going to be. And then I kind of work backward. I keep a separate document that is a chapter by chapter document. And I'm always changing that. I'm always adding to it. I'm always amending it. And I also keep another document that as I'm writing, all the questions that are popped up that I know are going to need to be answered. So, I work from those three things. But yeah, I'm an inveterate detailer, organizer, plotter. I've got to have it. I just need to know. I need to have some idea where I'm going. I might end up someplace else, and that's okay. I ended up someplace else on Failure Point, and the one I'm working on now, the sequel, I started to end somewhere, and now I know I'm going to end up someplace else completely different. But part of it is the nature of the kind of suspense thriller I like to write. I like to keep the pages turning. That's my goal. I want the reader to keep going. I want them to keep going. So I've got to know how the story plots from A to B to C to D in order to do that. obviously, as always, you've got to have chapters where you take a step back and let the reader take a breath. You've got to have chapters where you creatively summarize what's gone on.
Mhm.
But the fact is, one of the hardest things on the planet to do with a suspense thriller is to keep that breathless pace and not let the story go off the rails. If I didn't organize, if I wasn't plotting, I fear my stories would go off the rails. And I do whatever I can to prevent that from happening.
Do you ever worry about going too dark on your thrillers?
Um, yeah, I do. Not in a psychological horror or something like that. Probably more than anything else, I worry about getting a little bit too angry.
Mhm.
Um, I have a point of view. Most of my characters express it, but I have a point of view. And in Failure Point, there were a couple places where I had to dial it back. When I went back and looked at, in the last 2 or 3 read-throughs, frankly, when it was in galleys, I was still changing it. But I saw it was a little too mean in places.
Mhm.
It was a little too angry. It was a little too pointed. And I found that I could dial that back without really losing anything. I mean, and sometimes it's just a question of taking a word out, deleting a sentence. But, when you're writing about churches and cults, it's very easy to take a position and to almost make fun of what you're writing about and to comment on it. And I had done that a lot in the early drafts. So I had to dial that back because I thought it was appropriate for one, but it didn't really want to alienate readers. And I mean, I'm not one of these people that says all I care about is the audience. I mean, I do care about the audience. I care about the reader. But I do think that a healthy respect for the reader in, some ways is not a bad thing.
Now, whenever you write a book, do you write it in chronological order or do you write scenes and then kind of put it together like a puzzle?
I actually write it in chronological order. Like I said before, I've got a pretty good idea of where I'm going. Now, with plays, it's not. I write scenes in plays, put them in a file, and then assemble them.
Mhm.
But with a book, I pretty much start at the beginning and end at the end. There's going to be some detours along the way, but I do. Like I said, I want to know where I'm going, or I'm going to end up someplace else.
As an editor, how many times have you edited your book?
Well, I do something that I would not advise anybody to do. My background in journalism, I am a trained editor.
Mhm.
So I write and edit at the same time, which I wouldn't suggest to anybody. I think it'll drive you nuts. But because I can edit, I do it. Now, I will tell you that Nowhere Man, the book before this, had 18 complete write-throughs. 18. And I'm talking A to Z
Yeah.
write-throughs. This one probably only had about maybe 6 or 8. But I am one of those people that believes the adage that great works come from rewriting, not writing. So I'm not suggesting this is a great piece of art, but I do think that rewriting is essential, and I can be very hard on myself when I edit, and I think all writers should be. I think all writers should be hard on themselves. I had a couple of beta readers on this that I passed it out to, and their comments were good. Their comments were really good, and I infused them in. But the more I read it, the more I said, "Oh my God, there's an inconsistency here." Or I found a plot hole. I found a gaping plot hole in it that was so obvious to me when I got there. How could I have not seen this? And then my publisher was nice enough to let me edit on the galley, which I know you never do. And I even found some inconsistencies when I was proofing it for the last 2 or 3 run-throughs. Those are not real write-throughs. Those are really proofreading, but I found inconsistencies. I found stuff that didn't make sense. Names were off, or I'd called somebody a wrong name. But in terms of write-throughs, this time was 6 or 8 times, which for me is, that's a skate. That's nothing.
I know for me, I have so many notes for everything that I write. It's almost as big as the book that I'm writing.
Oh, I get it. And I don't know how you do it, Dianne, but what I started to do is I started to send myself texts when I have an idea.
Mhm.
If I'm not at the computer and I have a thought, I'll send myself a text as a reminder, and then I'll get it up on the note cards when I'm back in front of the computer. But, I do. And this one, when I was laying out this one, the new one, the sequel, I had all these great ideas, man. I was thinking this is going to rock and roll. But then when I assembled it, these great ideas just didn't fit into the narrative. And, the classic, you got to learn to kill your darlings. Well, I did.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So now why don't you go ahead and tell us about Failure Point?
Failure Point exists at two levels. First, it's a straight ahead thriller. It's about a FBI agent whose career has just tanked. After he's basically been fired by the Bureau, he comes home to find a Post-it note up on the refrigerator from his wife that says, "I can't take this anymore. I have to go." And about six or so weeks later, he out of nowhere discovers that she has joined a rather mysterious church/cult in East Texas. And he becomes convinced that she's been brainwashed and kidnapped, and assembles a group of similarly disgraced agents to crack out a plan to rescue her, to break her out. He doesn't realize that there are a whole lot of powerful people in Washington who don't want that to happen. They don't want him to find out what's really going on in this church, and they certainly don't want him to know who his wife really is. So that's, the spine of the story. That's the intention and the obstacle of the story. But the other thing is, I wanted to take a hard look at why marriages fail, having been through failed marriages. But in this case, the couple had a child, a little boy, who died in a car accident. The wife had sort of shut down. He had become an alcoholic and had an affair with a woman who he subsequently recruited to help get his wife back. But it's a look at, everything from communications to, sleeping in different rooms to never talking, looking at all the things that would define a marriage. And the other thing I wanted to examine is to pose the question, do we ever really know who our spouse is? Do we ever really know who they are? And that's kind of the question here. And it goes in about 25 different directions before you get to the end. But that's what it is. A friend of mine who's a filmmaker read the book, and he said, you can call this what you want, but he said, really, this is a love story. This is about a guy who's trying to put his marriage back together. That's what he's focused on. He says, you got all these odds, all these bad things going on. All he wants to do is get his estranged wife back. And that's why he goes through all these permutations, jumps through all these hoops with some rather surprising outcomes.
And it's also why we put you in with our Love Fest romance authors, because it is a romance story underneath all of the thriller action.
I couldn't agree with you more, Diane. And some of the best feedback I've gotten, I've got some dear friends who are romance writers, and they're telling me like, oh my God, it's spectacular. This is it's dark story about love. It's a dark story about intrigue. But the romance writer I know have read it just love it for the reasons you're talking about.
Now I think is the perfect time for us to do the 5 quick questions that never turn out to be quick. I'm just too stubborn to stop doing it.
Let's do it. I'm all in.
So question 1, what is your favorite leisure time activity when you actually have some free time?
I do a lot of reading. I do a lot of movie watching, studying film, and I do a lot of exercising. That's basically, that's how I spend my leisure time.
So what's your favorite movie?
Oh my God, I have probably 2 or 3. One is called The Battle of Algiers, which Marxist filmmaker named Gilles Pontecorvo did. And Robert Altman's Nashville is a favorite of mine, and Francis Ford Coppola's Apocalypse Now. Those are probably if I was on a desert island, those are the ones I could watch over and over and over again.
I was trying to think. There was one movie. It was like one of the very first movies that Harrison Ford made. Oh, something about Navarro.
Oh, Force 10 from Navarone.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, great movie.
I cannot even tell you how many times I've seen that movie.
Yeah, great movie. Really, really good. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of his. I think he's been, even though he's a megastar, I think he's been wildly underrated as a serious actor.
Oh, yeah. I tell you, one of the most recent films of his that I absolutely love is What Lies Beneath.
Yeah.
That had such a Hitchcock feel to it, and I love the camera angles and the psychological edge of the seat kind of thing through the whole thing. I thought that was fabulous, and that did not get enough attention.
Yeah, he can do drama, he can do adventure, he can do light comedy, he can do romantic comedy. Have you watched by any chance this, I don't know what network it streams on, but this TV show called Shrinking?
Shrinking? No.
He plays a psychiatrist, psychologist, whatever, who his partner is Jason Segel, but he's drifting into dementia. But it's a comedy. He is so good in that. So good. I recommend it to everybody, and I would recommend it to you. It's called Shrinking. I don't know if it's Netflix or Amazon. It's one of those. But boy, it's good. And he is outstanding. He's really good.
I'll have to see if we can get it here.
Yeah, it's really good.
We have been watching was it 1892, I think?
Oh, yeah, the Taylor Sheridan spinoff. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Is
He
it
is
good?
so good in that.
Yeah. I just finished watching Taylor Sheridan's latest one, which is Landman with Billy Bob Thornton.
Yeah, we've been watching that too.
Oh my God. If ever a man was born to play a role,
Yeah.
he was born to that. He is just brilliant in that. Just
Yeah,
brilliant.
he is.
Yeah.
Okay, where am I on this now?
Okay, we're
See,
on
this is
question
why
three.
it's never quick. It's because we get off into conversations. Okay. Okay, question 2.
Oh, okay.
Do you have any hidden talents that do you no good as a writer, but you're still pretty proud of?
I'm a classically trained pianist, but haven't played in 30 years. But I can still read music. I mean, that's saying something. I don't do it. My teacher was teaching me classics, but I wanted to play rock and roll piano. So, you know where that ends. But that's it. I sort of taught myself to play guitar there for a little while. And, I love music. So I would say that. I think that's something I kind of like about myself.
That is definitely something to be proud of. I took piano lessons for 2 years and I still cannot play anything on the piano.
Oh, well, one of my problems was that I was always chained to music. So I had to have sheet music in front of me. And then when I started playing the guitar, I started to learn music structures, chord sequences and things like that. So I was able to here and there listen to a song and maybe peck it out on the piano, which I kind of enjoy doing.
Mm-hmm.
But I just couldn't do the classics. It's just not my, it doesn't hold my interest. I can't listen to them. So, which means, you're never going to mistake me for a Renaissance man. I promise you.
So question 3, as a fan, who would you love to be able to meet?
Oh, writers or in general?
In
Writers?
general, can be anybody.
Wow. I would love to meet Francis Ford Coppola. I'd love to meet him. Yeah. I'd love to meet Carl Hiaasen, the comic mystery thriller writer, very much. I've already met Don Winslow, who's, one of my favorite authors writing today. I wish this is hedging the question, but I really wish that I could have met Ross Thomas, who's the author I'm reading. I'm reading his backlog now, and I think I've read 8 or 9 of his books in the past 3 months. But I think he's just a wonderful, wonderful writer. I was going to say George Clooney because I love his movies, but I'm not necessarily sure that would be a bucket list thing for me. So, those people, living and dead, probably that's love to have met Elmore Leonard too.
Oh yeah.
When I read Glitz, it was the first Elmore Leonard book I read, and it was like, oh my God, there's somebody that writes books for people like me. And David Mamet. I would love to meet David Mamet. He's the guy, when I saw Glengarry Glen Ross on Broadway, I said, here's a guy that writes plays for people like me. So he would be really good. I also did a BBC Maestro class with Lee Child. And tell you, it was one of the most fascinating, one of the most interesting and insightful things that I've ever seen in, online education. He was really, really good. And he was willing to kind of throw a lot of these cliche things, like write what you know, just throw them right out the window and gave explanations. He was just really, really good and fascinating background. So I think he'd be somebody who would be really cool to sit down with.
Question 4. I always love asking people this. If you could go back and give yourself a piece of advice to help you further your career beyond where it already is now and get where you would really like to be sooner, what do you think you would say to yourself?
I know exactly. I'd say to myself, it's important to do the work after you've done the work. In other words, when I was younger doing this stuff, for me, the joy was in the finishing. I'd write a play. I didn't care if it got produced. I had a great time writing the play. And I wish I would have realized then that the work doesn't end when the project ends, no matter how much you like it, no matter how satisfying it was to do the work. That's not closure. You've got to keep going.
Yeah.
And like I said, I was just happy. I was perfectly satisfied with doing the work and then moving on to the next project. And I wish that I had been a little more in tune to taking it the 5, 10, 15, 20 steps that needed to be taken upon completion. I just had, I guess, a closure problem. And I wish that I had the wisdom, the insight then compared to what I know now.
Last question. Question 5.
Oh, no. Okay.
When you walk into a bookstore to go buy something and you don't have a specific title in mind, where do you head first?
I go to mysteries and thrillers, one, and then I will go to dramatic arts. I'll go to film studies. Those are the two things I tend to go to. And, film studies, I mean, music too, but that's what I do. I immediately migrate to the shelves for mysteries and thrillers. And then secondarily, I go to the shelves, which are about film, theater, and music.
Do you find yourself collecting reference books?
I do. I've got a healthy stack of them, in terms of helping me with content, but also in actually helping me with the just the process of writing.
Mm-hmm.
I do. I've got, one of the things that I've applied to my novel writing is a technique in film on how you move people from scene to scene. And, it's a great reference book. And I use it now to propel people from chapter to chapter. And it's a great way to keep your momentum going. So I've got that. I collect books on emotional intelligence, on people, how they act when they're distraught. I've got a great book that's got like 300 conditions, and it tells you this is how it manifests itself physically. This is what the face does. This is what the eyes do. This is how the body feels. And that's just been, incredibly beneficial to me, as I said, from being someone that doesn't want to write he said all the time.
Yeah. I cannot thank you enough. This has been absolutely fabulous. I've had so much fun talking to you.
Dianne, you're the best. You are the best. I really enjoyed this a lot, and I really thank you for having me.
As always, all of your information is going to be in the description of the podcast, as well as on our website at burkhartbooks.com. And you are the final author scheduled in the Love Fest for March.
Cool. That sounds great.
So there you have it, folks. My incredible interview with the multi-talented Doug Williams. Be sure to go to our website at burkhartbooks.com and check out all of the cool things that we have going on right now. We just did an update on our media package examples page that not only shows you how to create a one sheet for you and your book, it also has a link to a template where you can just drag and drop your information and go. Don't forget to check out our Book Banter Magazine's holiday book buying issue while you're on our website. You can get this 132-page literary magazine that covers all 44 authors from season 4, and it only costs $2.99. Not only do we have information about all of our author interviews from this season, but we also have fun pages, book reviews, a few features, and so much more. Now for the authors who are going to be featured in the rest of our holiday hiatus. On January 7th, we have Riza August, author of The Road Unpaved, Border to Border with a Brain Tumor and a Bike. On January 14th, we have Miles Spencer, co-author of the Amazon bestseller A Line in the Sand. January 21st, Linda Hughes, romantic women's fiction author of the Second Chances series. And our last hiatus episode, January 28th, features Joel Shulkin, MD, author of the forensic techno-thriller Heroic Measures. So be sure to come back every Wednesday because you do not want to miss out on any of these episodes. Because if you love books like we do, you do not want to miss a single episode of our podcast. So there you have it, folks. I hope you go forth and have a very wonderful holiday break.